Hello number ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking, and if there is one thing that I've always been fascinated with is weapons and armor, particularly when it comes to ancient, Bronze Age, classical period, medieval period, you name it. However, today's topic, as you know from the title, bows and arrow, is a lot more ancient than that. But for this video's research, we'll have to dive all the way back to the dawn of humanity. If I were to ask you to imagine a bow and arrow, close your eyes. Imagine an archer with bows and arrow. What's the picture that comes to your mind first? No thinking, first picture. I'm going to venture a guess and say that most likely for most people it's going to be some form of a medieval looking archer. This is of course due to the fact that both in movies and video games the archer connected in association with medieval warfare is basically omnipresent. Here is an example from the game Chivalry, Medieval Warfare. Already the first thing we'd like to say is that these are not always accurate. I mean, if you look at this, they're great in their world, particularly if it's fantasy, but one thing they always get wrong, and it pisses me off, is that they give all medieval archers this wrapped handle, which, if you look at actual medieval iconography, is non-existent. No, even these pictures show with a freaking wrapped handle. It's like, come on. These are good. Look, these are actual medieval longbows, exactly with the double lamination. That's it. I think that's more like a feature of maybe Victorian target practice bows, maybe. But yeah, I think we can say that in general, when we look at medieval iconography, we often see the archer. It's often, in fact, a longbowman, but again, there are all sorts of different variations, even if we only were to look at the medieval period alone. And in fact, it tends to be a little bit of a late medieval image, the one that we tend to have in our mind. Here's another very good one. What's interesting is that the idea of representing archers is in fact very, very old, even from a medieval perspective. Here we have some archers during the Battle of Hastings in 1066. This is from the Bayeux Tapestry. And in fact, early medieval, high medieval, late medieval, archers are everywhere. And yet the concept of the archer is not medieval. It became implemented en masse in the Middle Ages, particularly in countries such as England, and it definitely was perfected in the medieval period. I mean, look at, for example, apart from this beautiful, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous, self-yew English longbow. Whew! But then, of course, as I was saying, in the medieval period, it gets perfected. We have the Mary Rose bow. It's one of the greatest examples. 137 whole bows were found on the Mary Rose. For those who don't know, it's a military ship. In fact, the Mary Rose is fascinating because of the bows that we find and the arrows, but it had incredible cannons. Maybe that's something you haven't seen. Well, if you haven't, I got to show you. Here it is, the Mary Rose. Fantastic ship. No wonder these were called castles on the water. Castles on water. There you go. Look at this. My demi cannons. And there we go. A cast bronze culver in front and a wrought iron port piece in the back. So this is bronze. This is wrought iron. A lot of artillery, by the way, tends to be bronze, even all the way up to the late Middle Ages and the early modern period, because bronze has an excellent resistance when it comes to water and salinity and all that. I mean, you still use iron, but bronze has its advantages. And another thing about bronze and warships, particularly after the advent of gunpowder, is the fact that it doesn't produce sparks, so it's a little safer to use bronze tools and items, particularly in the vicinity of gunpowder barrels. The Middle Ages is definitely the moment of the realization of the longbow and archery in general, but archery was a thing in the classical period. Probably one of the most classical example is the Cretan archer, so archers from the island of Crete, utilized as auxiliary or ranged corps both by the Greeks and the Romans subsequently, and by you if you play Total War. Does that count? And then, of course, we have Scythian archers, so populations of the steppes, Eurasia, etc. So there are a lot of these are just two examples. There is archery in the classical period, but it's not as ubiquitous as it would be in medieval armies. Now, given when I say archery, if we expand a little bit and go into ranged in general, then you add slingers, you add crossbowmen. But in general, bows and arrows, medieval period, classical antiquity, absolutely. What about before? Do we have archery and bows and arrows in the Iron Age? Yes. Bronze Age? Yes. In fact, if we don't consider specifically war units, organized military applications, and we consider bows and arrows as a hunting implement, we are going back to the at least Mesolithic period, at least prehistory. In fact, I want to dive a little deeper into my statement that I just made now. I said, if we consider bows and arrows as a hunting implement, we can go all the way back at least to the Mesolithic period. Why did I say it like this? Well, one is because personally I believe that the bows and arrows as a hunting implement is a Paleolithic invention. I'll try and defend it in a minute. But also because, look at this. This is a cave carving and it's from Spain. It was dated to the Mesolithic period. What it represents, however, is not a hunting party. It's a battle. And during this battle, they are shooting at each other clearly with bows. So, as a war implement, of course not in the same organizational or tactical or strategic way as it would be done in later periods, but as a war implement, we have documented evidence that demonstrates that human against human archery was already a thing in the Mesolithic period. And really, think about it. How strange is it to think that you have this invention, you have bows and arrows, they work really well to hit game, hunt, kill animals, and your people, your hunters are actually pretty good at it, right? The accuracy-wise and their ability to, the muscle as well, because these are people that use these implements probably several times a week in order to provide for a village. So if you think with rotations probably. So these are people that are have a certain muscularity to them, they're precise, they're accurate, they're good at what they're doing, and they are used to hit prey even if it's moving, perhaps trying to run, right, if they miss the first hit. So how much of a gap really do you need to go from I need to hit the deer so that we can eat to hey, I can shoot that muppet from the rival tribe, yeah, the one that smashed a rock and killed my brother. Personally, I think that whoever invented the bow and arrow, give it 2 generations, it was already used against another human. Who knows? Maybe it was used even earlier than that. I cannot prove it. Logically, you can imagine how likely it is that any implement, they made a club, they smashed someone in the head with it. That's probably why it is my opinion that first armor comes out not in the Bronze Age, but in the Copper period, in the Copper Age, the Chalcolithic. Because, yeah, it wasn't great, but it's still better to cover your head with a sheet of metal, in this case copper, if you're going to be hit. It's soft, of course, so depth, thickness will have to be considered. Anyways, bronze for sure. Arsenical bronze for sure. So yeah, cover the head because they want to smack something hard onto it is something that unfortunately we figured out quite early, didn't we? If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. Oh, and by the way, you know that TikToker that you saw one day, or YouTuber hopefully, like the girl that was so good at it, that was using her legs and feet in order to draw the bow and show and wow, it's amazing she can do that. How did she come up with that idea? The ancient Greeks already did. So, I mean, some things are a lot more ancient than you think. The bow and arrow is one of humanity's older complex ranged weapons, combining flexible engineering with aerodynamic projectiles. Its invention marks a major leap from thrown weapons like spears, javelin, rocks, and slings to a device that stores energy in a bent stave. When it comes to the earliest possible evidence, we have something from 64,000 years ago. Microscopic wear patterns on stone points from Sibudu cave, South Africa, may indicate that they were hafted to small shafts and propelled by bows. It is important to underline that this interpretation is still debated. When it comes to the most secure, earliest evidence that we have, it belongs to 48,000 years ago, in Sri Lanka's Phra Hien Lina cave, which yielded bow and arrow points with damage consistent with high-speed impact from a bow. And if we go to 40,000 to 32,000 years ago, in Africa's late Stone Age sites, microliths shaped as arrowheads appear, indicating established bow use. It is likely that the bow emerged independently in multiple regions once humans mastered cordage, hafting, and composite toolmaking. These could be considered as the 3 pre-requirements for any people to be able to come to the invention or discovery of the bow and arrow mechanic. Whenever we look at this from a prehistoric development timeline, we have to remember a few things. The Stone Age is divided into 3: the Paleolithic, the Mesolithic, and the Neolithic, and several technological leaps occurred in all of these eras. This that you see here is probably the most ancient representation of an animal, specifically a bull, and it has been dated to 52,000 years ago from Indonesia. In the Paleolithic, particularly in the Upper Paleolithic, the technological leaps would have been the introduction of stringed projectile launchers, which allowed hunters to kill game at safer distances with greater accuracy than thrown darts. When it comes to materials, we have simple self-bow made from a single piece of wood, arrows tipped with stone, bone, or hardened wood. In the Mesolithic period, however, is when we have widespread archaeological finds of bows and arrows across Europe, and in fact in Eurasia. And some of the oldest bows are preserved in bogs. They come from Denmark, dated 8000 BC. Arrow shafts from sites like Stelmore, Germany, 9000 BC, show standardized production, implying specialized craftsmanship. In the Neolithic period, now bows are integrated into farming societies and as both hunting and warfare tools. Arrows became more varied in design, leafed, shaped, flint heads, all used to suit different prey and combat scenarios. Depictions of archers in Neolithic rock show organized hunting and conflict, as we showed before. The bow and arrow was absolutely a revolutionary invention in prehistory. One of the reasons is the fact that the bow stores mechanical energy in the bent limbs, releasing it suddenly, far more powerful than muscle-driven throwing. This means that you can achieve a higher range and maintain accuracy through practice, enabling engagement beyond spear range. Also, there is an opportunity for stealth. One could argue that archers are quieter than spear throwers, and therefore make it better for ambush hunting. Another characteristic of this implement, whether it be used as a tool or a weapon, is portability, easily carried over long distances. Humans, prehistoric, ancient or modern, have always been ingenious. Even concepts and ideas such as the composite bow are still prehistoric innovations, in other words, just before the dawn of recorded history, being the connection of wood, horn, and sinew, which appeared in Central Asia by the late Neolithic, early Bronze Age. While bow and arrows definitely began as a hunting innovation, it was its versatility as both a weapon and a hunting implement that shaped both survival and warfare. We shouldn't only focus on its killing power, but in its ability to change hunting strategies, societal organization, and human interaction among themselves and with the environment. Alright, number ones, but I hope that you enjoyed this brief reflection and thoughts about the bows and arrow and its real prehistoric origins. If you liked this video, let me know and I will make more, maybe on the spear, maybe something a little longer if you're interested. But for now, thank you very much for watching and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.